Maybe rock stardom isn't all it's cracked up to be. Welcome to WatchMojo.com, and today we're counting down our picks for the top 10 bandmates who hate each other. Before we begin, we publish new content every day, so be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. For this list, we're looking at bandmates, both past and present, who have famously never gotten along. It doesn't matter if these people have reconciled in recent years. As long as they once hated each other, they will be included. We'll be ranking our picks based on the fame of the musicians in question and the intensity of the animosity between them. Number 10, Eddie Van Halen versus everyone except Alex. Van Halen. Maybe there's a reason the band is called Van Halen. It's almost like Ed doesn't want anyone else there. The guitarist and David Lee Roth have decades of animosity between them, mostly stemming from Roth's outgoing, childlike personality rubbing EVH the wrong way, which may have been exacerbated by Ed's battles with booze. But Ed has also spoken ill of former bassist Michael Anthony, claiming Anthony was a, quote, garbage bass player. Then there's Roth's most famous replacement, Sammy Hagar, who left in the late 90s over managerial and creative differences. Rock and roll is tough, and the personalities within often tougher.
We cried and we hugged and he split, and 2 weeks later I'm reading in Rolling Stone what an asshole I am.
Number 9, Caleb Followill versus Jared Followill. Kings of Leon.
I can't get there on my own.
Getting along with family can be difficult. Just imagine if you had to work and tour with them every day. Caleb and Jared Followill, along with their brother Nathan and cousin Matthew, make up Kings of Leon, the band behind songs like Sex on Fire and Use Somebody.
You know that I can use somebody.
And, like most brothers in music, Caleb and Jared don't exactly get along. Or at least they didn't. It mostly stemmed from Caleb's alcoholism, as Jared despised Caleb's nonchalance and unprofessional behavior. Caleb in turn hated Jared for tarnishing his name and not believing in him. Luckily, Caleb eventually quit drinking and the brothers reconciled.
If anybody had emotion,
Number 8, Mike Love versus Brian Wilson. The Beach Boys.
anybody be surfing like California.
Cousins Mike Love and Brian Wilson pioneered surf rock, and they revolutionized musical production with their 1996 album Pet Sounds. But Beach Boys Mike and Brian rarely saw eye to eye. Mike has even called himself Brian's Antichrist due to their constant clashing, which included heated arguments over the band's experimental direction in the 60s. He also took Brian to court on numerous occasions for defamation and writing credits. And despite the two reuniting for a 50th anniversary tour, Love, who owns the Beach Boys brand, disbanded the anniversary lineup when the tour ended and resumed performing with a pack of hired guns.
No, it seems the more we talk about it, it only makes it worse to live without it.
How can you tell what's a dream and what's real when you can't even tell when you're awake and when you're...
Number 7, Lars Ulrich and James Hetfield versus Jason Newsted. Metallica.
I can't remember anything, can't tell if this is true or dream.
Despite Newsted serving as Metallica's bassist for almost 15 years, he was always the odd man out.
Couldn't be much more from the heart.
This largely stems from him not being Cliff Burton, the band's original bass player, who was killed in a bus accident while the band were touring Sweden in 1986.
Every day for us something new.
The band welcomed Newsted by burying his bass tracks on And Justice for All. Newsted chalked this up to Lars and James hazing him, but they would later blame this on his playing. Although seemingly there for the long haul, Newsted never quite felt respected and exited the band after a disagreement with Hetfield about a side project.
I knew that was my last performance with Metallica.
Number 6, Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley versus Ace Frehley and Peter Criss. Kiss.
You show us everything you got.
Here we see a band split right down the middle. Kiss was one of the biggest and most controversial rock bands of the 70s, known for their electrifying music and elaborate stage shows. And while they continue to play to this day, they do so without Ace Frehley and Peter Criss. Criss was dismissed in 1980, and Frehley left soon after over disagreements with the band's direction and for constantly being ignored in band decisions. Although the band held a reunion in 1995, both Ace and Peter have re-exited and remain on poor terms with Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley, who, among themselves, don't seem to be on great terms anymore.
Any idiot can get a woman when they're on tour, but this is a lot more important.
The world is a vampire.
Number 5. Billy Corgan vs. Darcy Wretzky and Billy Corgan vs. James Iha, The Smashing Pumpkins. The Smashing Pumpkins were huge, but man were they hostile. James Iha and Darcy Wretzky briefly dated, but managed to keep things cordial post-breakup. Relations between Darcy and Billy Corgan were never quite as smooth. Although credited on albums up until Machina 2, Wretzky held resentment after Corgan took over her bass duties on Siamese Dream, and Corgan has been less than kind towards her since the 90s came to a close.
Despite all my rage, I am still just a rat in a...
Though Iha rejoined the Pumpkins earlier this year, he, like Darcy, did not take part in their initial reunion, and had been referred to by Corgan as a, quote, piece of shit, and, quote, one of the worst human beings he's ever met. Number 4. Paul Simon vs. Art Garfunkel, Simon and Garfunkel.
We'd like to know a little bit about you for our file.
Simon and Garfunkel are one of the best-known duos in music history, and believe it or not, they hated each other's guts nearly every step of the way.
What's that you say, Mrs. Robinson?
The recording of Bridge Over Troubled Water was rife with difficulties for the duo, and they called it quits after its release. They later refused to talk to each other, and despite brief reunions, continue their resentment and constant verbal jabs.
We've known each other since we're 11.
Yeah, that's hard sometimes.
We've been having arguments since we're 12.
When Simon was asked about a reunion in 2016, he quickly shut it down, telling the reporter that he and Garfunkel don't get along and that touring with him is not enjoyable.
And whispered in the sounds of silence.
Number 3. Roger Waters vs. David Gilmour, Nick Mason, and Richard Wright, Pink Floyd.
Breathe in the air.
Already industry vets, Pink Floyd's commercial peak came with 1973's The Dark Side of the Moon, lasting until The Wall, but that sudden and massive success also ratcheted up the tension between bassist and principal songwriter Roger Waters and the rest of the band. Waters' exclusive role as lyricist netted him half the royalties to any of their non-instrumental songs, while he typically wrote or co-wrote the majority of the music during this era as well, entitling him to an additional cut.
My hands felt just like two balloons.
Issues between Waters and Wright led to Wright's dismissal, while Waters' animosity with Gilmour and dissatisfaction with Mason ultimately led to Waters himself leaving.
You will not understand. This is not how I am.
Number 2. Axl Rose vs. Slash, Guns N' Roses.
When I look into your eyes, I can see love restrained.
Guns N' Roses were exactly what the late 80s needed, but while Axl and Slash couldn't have done it without each other, they really could have done without each other. Tensions between the two finally hit a breaking point in 1996 when Slash took his top hat and went home, following in the footsteps of Izzy Stradlin and Steven Adler. At the time, he stated that it was due to personal and creative differences with Rose, but would later cite Rose's hostile attitude and unprofessional behavior, Rose's increasing legal control of the band, and the earlier departures of his missed bandmates as a motivator. Number 1, Liam versus Noel Gallagher, Oasis.
Slip inside the eye of your mind.
Woo boy, where do we even start with the Gallaghers? Well, it's really more like Liam hating Noel with every fiber of his being.
So Sally can wait.
Liam has reportedly expressed his wish to beat his brother with a guitar and constantly refers to him as a potato over social media. Liam apparently got his wish in 2009 as the brothers came to physical blows at a festival and Liam swung a guitar at Noel's head.
You know, he nearly took my face off with it, you know. So I was like, you know what? I'm out of here.
Noel has in turn stated that Liam is frightened to death of him and that he, quote, plays him like a slightly disused arcade game. Ah, nothing like the timeless bonds of brotherly love.
I said, maybe you're gonna be the one that saves me.
Do you agree with our picks? Check out these other great clips from WatchMojo and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.
You're my wonder.